Bună seara, urmăriți Politica, Natalia Morari. Astăzi vom discuta despre subiectul care reprezintă o pasiune de-a mea profesională ca jurnalist. Vorbim despre corupție politică, impunitate în țări capturate și mafiote. Asta a fost principalul generic al conferinței internaționale Transparency International, care a avut loc această marți în Chișinău. Mai mulți invitați din diferite țări ale lumii, experți în combaterea spălării banilor, experți anticorupție, au venit la Chișinău și au discutat ce să facă regiunea noastră și cum să răspundă la acest pericol mare regional. Eu îi salut în studio pe invitații mei din această seară, invitat special emisiunii Politică, Balint Maghiar, politician, fost ministru al educației, cercetător din Ungaria. Welcome to TV8 in Moldova. Lor Brilio, expert combaterea spălării banilor, Transparency International Belgia. Bună seara, welcome to Moldova and TV8. Și Cristof Bobinski, președintele Forumului Societății Civile al Parteneriatului Estic, Polonia. Bună seara, welcome to TV8 in Moldova. Acum eu voi trece în limba engleză, traducerea va fi asigurată pe parcursul emisiunii. I will pass on to English. It would be much easier for us not to lose any time of the show, because the subject is really, really important. First of all, can you ask every one of you, why did you decide to come to Chișinău, Moldova, and discuss about impunity and political corruption? Is this subject or problem so big that you needed to lose at least 3 days of your life talking about political corruption? Mr. Maghiar.
Of course, the subject is really important, but I visited since 2010 several times Chișinău. I was an advisor at the ministry for a while, assisting in the creation of higher education law and public education law.
So, do you think that this problem is really important, and for Moldova it's really important that we need to talk now about impunity, political corruption, captured states and mafia states in Moldova?
Yes, not only for Moldova, but practically for the whole post-communist region, because the centralized and monopolized forms of corruption, they create new types of regime, and that dream of the regime changes failed, which showed that practically we have a royal road from dictatorship to liberal democracy.
Mrs. Brewer, how huge the problem is for the region or for the world?
Well, coming from Brussels and looking at on a daily basis at money laundering issues in the EU, I decided to come because money laundering issues have been high on the EU agenda for a while, and it's not just internal risk, some EU countries being plagued by corruption, systemic corruption, but also neighboring countries and the risk of importing that into the EU. And also because the EU is a neighbor, it increases also the vulnerability of Moldova. And so this fight against corruption cannot be won without close cooperation between the EU region and Moldova. They are closely interdependent when it comes to corruption, and so the fight against it should also be. They should also join forces to fight against it.
Mr. Bobinski, as a representative of civil society sector, can you tell me, please, civil society always talks about corruption, always. It never changed. Why political corruption should be taken separately?
I don't think it can be taken separately. I think it's part of the same thing. Corruption is corruption, and political corruption is also an extension of corruption. You asked my colleagues why we came here. Well, I came here because we've always been interested in Moldova. Moldova is a part of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. We have friends in the Civil Society Forum here in the national platform. And this thing became very noticeable when Mr. Nastase, who won the election in Chișinău for the mayor, his election was invalidated, and then we started looking at what is happening. We saw that the European Commission was very, very unhappy about what is happening in Moldova and seems to be actually helpless. It doesn't seem to be able to do much about the deterioration of the political situation. And then when you look closer, you see that the corruption is getting worse, that the country seems to be in the hands of people who are interested in extending the corruption and also changing the Moldova into a kind of center of money laundering for the countries in for the post-Soviet states, but also in the middle of Europe, actually. That it looks, beginning to look as if they're aiming to make it into a kind of playground for people who want to launder money which they've stolen somewhere else. And this is a threat for the...
And money went to Europe.
And money went to Europe, and it's a threat for the financial system throughout Europe, and this is something that Lord is concentrating on, but it looks as if this is a complete innovation for financial circles.
I would like to start discussing your book, because you had a big research which can be read in your book, Corruption versus Criminal State, the Hungarian Mafia State. It happens like in Moldova, when we speak about European Union, we think that European model is much better than ours here in Moldova. It's obvious for everybody. But when we look deep inside to Hungarian state, we understand that it doesn't look like everywhere European model works. How it happened that Hungary became a mafia state, according to you?
We had an election catastrophe, I would say, in 2010, when, because of different factors, world economic crisis, the bad governance of the socialist liberal government, some corruption cases, and this not proportionate election system, the Fidesz right-wing party, with the leadership of Viktor Orban, they gained two-thirds majority in the parliament, in spite of the fact that they gained only, in quotation mark, 53% of the votes. And then, as the monopoly of political power was put in their hands, then practically could change alone, a single political force could change alone the constitution and appoint the leaders of all institutions which should serve as the institutions of checks and balances. Now, if we combine this fact with the case of corruption, then I would say that the two motives of his governance is on one hand concentrating political power and the other hand accumulating personal family wealth. And the corruption has about 4 different levels. The lower thing is the petty corruption when, when scattered actors temporarily have corruption transactions. The second level, when oligarchs or criminals from the organized underworld approaches the representatives of public authorities, bribes them, threatens them, blackmails them, etc. This is the oligarchic state capture. But there is
when oligarchs stay alongside with the state structure.
With the state structure,
yeah.
the next level, this is the party state capture, when the political parties try to build out their own patron-client network, but still they do not have a monopolistic position, and they are competing with each other. And the fourth level is what I call criminal state, and this is the case of a mafia state, when a single political actor can monopolize the political power, and his clan structure, the ruling elite has an adopted political family as a structure. They can monopolize not only the political power, but with the help of this political power, they practically abolish all rival patron-client networks, surrender them or liquidate them. And this is when we can speak about mafia states. Within the EU, Hungary is the only one such country.
Thanks God. We will later talk about the Moldovan case, because in this part I want to discuss a general subject. But how did it happen that in the middle of Europe, a European state became a mafia state with elections?
Yes, but of course, if I should point to institutional constraints which should be very important to avoid such a situation, one is the proportionate election system and the other is the divided executive power. I think that if in Bulgaria or in Romania or Slovakia, even in Czech Republic, any of the political forces, left or right political forces, would seize the monopoly of political power, they could build out, and they would build out their patron-client network, a monopolistic patron-client network. Their luck, the population there, their citizens has a luck that with the proportionate election system, none of the political forces, none of the political actors can get into a monopolistic position.
Maybe that's why in Moldova, for example, speaking about Moldova, they changed the system from proportional system to a mixed one, but we will discuss it later. I want to ask Mr. Bobinski, risky. I know that Poland is also not the best example of what means democratical way of making policy in recent years. But how do you explain how it happens that in the middle of Europe, such states as mafia state, such structures as mafia state appear?
Well, Poland isn't a mafia state. And,
no, I don't talk about Poland. I talk about Hungary, but I know that Poland is also not the best example. There are also problems there. But how do you explain how it happens that in the middle of Europe, with strong European institutions, with all the checks and balances, with elections, with everything, oligarchs or mafia people or criminals, they gain the power? How it happens? Who has money, who pays money, has everything.
Money does speak. It's a very powerful medium of communication, and you can buy people, you can bribe people, you can hire people to intimidate people. So you can win power using money. But also you have problems with populism. You have people who are unhappy. They're unhappy with the political developments and economic developments of the last 30 years. And they begin to look for other solutions because they think that they have been cheated by the elites. They become against the elites. And then comes a charismatic leader who says, I will solve all these problems for you. Just vote for me.
Usually a populist one.
It's a populist one. It's populism. This is what is happening. And
with dirty money backside. Sometimes.
Well,
sometimes.
I don't want to go, yes, of course, sometimes, but money is always involved. In Poland, we had a different situation, but in Poland, the constitutional structures are resisting, the lawyers are resisting, because it's really, in the end, it comes down to the justice system. If you have a good justice system, if you have good lawyers, if you have good judges, honest judges, judges who won't be intimidated and won't be can't be bribed, then you can fight back. And this is now happening in Poland, where the government wanted to take control of the justice system, and it's actually not happening. Also, the European Union is helping.
And what's important, people are protesting against that. That's really important.
People are protesting, but you can't count on protests because people get tired after a time. You know, even if you bring 100,000 people out onto the street once, and then maybe 3 weeks later another time, and they see this isn't changing anything immediately, then protests aren't enough. What you need is actually for institutions to resist. And this is happening in Poland, and the European Union is also very important.
And what do you do for institutions to resist?
At European level, you mean?
Yeah.
So it's quite difficult because these leaders have been democratically elected, so it's hard for the EU to just override them. And these leaders are also sitting in the Council of the EU, but the political pressure can work. There are not that many leverage, but the political pressure can work. Conditioning EU funds to the respect of rule of law can also be a good leverage. And then the EU can even consider, but that's politically a bit more risky, going for more like infringement procedures or more like harshest measures against the countries that are deemed not to respect the rule of law. But this is a bit in like ultimate resort, you know. They're trying all the political diplomatic means before that.
Mr. Bobiński said a very important thing, that what is needed is institutions to resist, because it's not about people. It should be not about people, separate people, political leaders. It should be about institutions which stay alive no matter what and no matter who comes into power. Even, for example, American example, we see that it doesn't matter. You can have a president or like Donald Trump, but the United States, isn't under the threat because institutions are really strong. What happens in the region like ours, and here I speak not only about Moldova separately we'll speak later. I speak about ex-Soviet Union, as it said, all these former Soviet republics, which past 19 years with a huge economical crisis after Soviet Union collapsed. We remained quite connected to Russian economy. Plus to that, we had always a huge influence from Russia over this region, and now if we speak openly, we can speak about threats coming from Russia. Look at Ukraine, what happened. And in these conditions, when you have external threats coming towards your country, and in the country you have a poor society, when you have a poor society, you can corrupt it much easier than, rather than. It's understandable why institutions are really weak, and when institutions are weak, it's easier for.
It's not just the question of the standard of living. Of course, it counts, but not only. But there are some stubborn sociological structures which historically somehow determine the evolution of these societies. This is that, as far as we are going to the east, the separation of the different spheres of social action, the politics, economy, and the communal action, were not separated like during 400 years in Western Europe. The patron-client relations survived. The private appropriation of the state also has strong roots. The corruption also, and not only the petty corruption, but also the other type of corruption, centralized and organized corruption. And these deep structures are working in these societies. And is
it about culture, mentality, or something different?
Not only cultural mentality, of course, some cultural mentality, but when you are speaking about institutions and the strengths of institutions, in Western Europe or in the liberal democracies, they were the result of a few hundred years of development. Yeah. And this did not happen in this part of the world, and as we are going further to the east, at least it happened. And therefore, they are much more vulnerable towards such things. So the difference is that the old type of communist ruling elite, which was the nomenclatura, now different patron-client networks take over this kind of role, and they become the new ruling elites. And these patron-client networks, based on a clan structure, practically, which means that the non-kinship relations are transformed into quasi-kinship relations. Families are joining to it, and that the decision-making is taken out from the formal institutions. So when I want to refer back the difference between Poland and Hungary, I would say that, of course, they are two autocratic attempts, but different type of autocratic attempts. Poland is going towards a kind of conservative autocracy. Of course, it did not reach, and it's much more. We have much more hope to turn back this thing. But there, the decision-making remained in formal institutions. Anybody in Poland who has political power, they are members of formal institutions. For example, the ruling party. In Hungary, it's not the case. Those who are bringing decisions, really, in sociological terms, bringing decisions, they are the members of the so-called chief patron's court, the godfather's court, which consists of formal and informal positions. Even such guys are there at the top leadership who has no formal positions at all, not any political authorization or institutional authorization. And this is why I say that it's a kind of mafia state. It's not because of only the criminality of the organization, which means that the governance is operated as a criminal organization. This is why we can call it as a organized upper world, contrary to the organized underworld, but also because of the structure of this ruling elite.
But can I ask you, what Hungarians think about this mafia state?
It's strange that the Hungarians see relatively well that what is the nature of the corruption. For example, for a question which was put in a public opinion poll last December, when they are asked that what do they think that whether the diverting public money is a result of centrally planned action from above, or is just the result of dishonest public servants at the bottom, two-thirds of them, they say that it's centrally organized. Even more than 30% of the followers of the Fidesz, of the ruling party, they say that it's centrally organized. And when they are asked that whether these stooges who has formal ownership, but not they are the real owner, but politicians whom we call oligarchs, which means that you have political you have political power, visible and invisible economic one, just the contrary, like the oligarch who has visible economic power and invisible political one. So these oligarchs get money from these stooges. Then again, 2/3 of the population said that is the case, that even the prime minister draws revenue through these illegal actions.
I have a total deja vu when I'm listening about what's happening in Hungary, but about that later. Now we are going to announce a short advertising pause. Urmează o scurtă pauză, revenim în câteva clipe, rămâneți cu noi. Noi am revenit, continuăm să discutăm cu invitații speciali de la conferința internațională organizată marțea aceasta în Chișinău de către Transparency International Moldova. Continuăm să discutăm cu invitații mei, specialiști anticorupție și pe spălare de bani, despre ce se întâmplă în regiune și cum Republica Moldova ar putea face față la asemenea provocări. I want to continue what you told about Hungary, Mr. Magyar. It happens that in these cases when oligarchic, you told, structure has the monopoly over political space, they use elections in order to keep the power. And here political corruption comes out, because you need media, you need to pay people, maybe not bribes, but you need to come with lots of presents before elections, you need to come with lots of charity foundations and all that stuff. How opposition in these countries, and I'm talking about the whole region, can face this challenge when you don't have access to all the media in the country, because usually media is monopolized by the same structures, when you don't have enough money because all financial flows are controlled by same party. How can they, let's say, get to people to be heard?
They can't.
They can't?
This is basically the problem of state capture, which we're seeing in Moldova, that people, the rulers become so powerful, they have so much money, they have so many ways of influencing people, that it's very difficult to be in opposition unless there is some kind of disaster, some catastrophe, economic catastrophe, or some terrible scandal. Then the mood will change. But basically, in the situation in which I fear that Moldova is going, and other countries which may find themselves in this situation, it becomes impossible for the citizens to resist and get their rights back from the oligarchs or the polygarchs. Or they have to rely either on external organs, like in the European Union. If you have a situation, then you go to the European Commission, you go to Brussels, and you ask Brussels to help. You have the courts in Luxembourg and in Strasbourg. If you're a member of the Council of Europe, you can appeal to these courts, and I think this is something that should be beefed up. That's really all you can do. You can rely on it. You can begin to rely on international law. You can make appeals. You can ask the the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum to help, etc. But it's very, very difficult. We were talking today to opposition politicians in Moldova, and it's very, very difficult if the ruling party is lying in the media and the lies are repeated. And we have this in Poland as well. It's actually very difficult to oppose when the government does not tell the truth in its media.
Brio, can opposition or civil society somehow oppose to all the challenges?
Yeah, as Christoph just said, it's really hard once you don't have any more checks and balances. The judiciary is not independent anymore. There is like shrinking civic space for media, but also civil society. It becomes really hard to just fight that internally. External forces can help, and that's where countries like Poland or Hungary are lucky to be inside the EU, because at least there is a bit of political pressure coming from the EU, a bit more than being exerted on Moldova. But it's still it has to come from the, like my feeling, it has to come from the inside. Social media today can be a means. We've seen that for the Arab Spring countries. We've seen that in Ukraine, and citizens have the capacity to mobilize, to get mobilized via social media, and that could be a leverage. But yeah, once checks and balances are out, it's really hard to find the space in the country to actually oppose.
I want to propose you now to discuss the Moldovan case. Let's step a bit down and discuss Moldovan case, and then we will get back to the general subject. We should discuss what do you consider Moldova is a captured state or mafia state, criminal state, or according to your research. From my point of view, it's a classical mafia state, but it's my point of view. My show is an editorial show, so I can allow myself to express my opinion. This is for what our channel is famous for being free and to have courage to express our own opinions. What I wanted to tell you, let's start from the beginning. 4 years ago, we had parliamentary elections. Actual governing party, Democratic Party, with the leader of Vlad Plahotniuc, famous businessman who is called by everyone an oligarch, and you will understand why oligarch. They got 19 seats in the parliament, 19 from 101. Later, quite soon, it happened just in a couple of weeks, months, it happens that Liberal Democrats who got 23 mandates got 5. All of them became independent and later part of democratic majority. Communists had 21 mandates and they remained with 6 from 21. Same here. First independents and then the members of majority. Liberals from 12 to 9 and socialists from 24 to from 25 to 24. So it happened that Democratic Party, who got just 19 seats in the parliament, now has the majority, 52 mandates. Plus to that, the leader of Democratic Party unofficially has 6 channels, biggest ones in the country. Why unofficially? Because according to Moldovan law, one physical person cannot have more than 2 channels. So what he did? He owns 2 channels, his political advisor owns another 2 channels, his business administrator owns another 2 channels. Plus of that, 5 radio stations with national coverage, the biggest sales house, businesses like Moltelecom, monopolies like exports of metals, and so on. I can continue. Plus to that, it is known and I'm based now not on public opinion polls, I'm based on expertise made by experts from Transparency International, for example, or other think tanks. We can speak about almost total control over justice from political side, from Democrats. We can speak about total control over central prosecution. The central prosecutor is a person who is directly linked to Democratic Party. Same with intelligence service, same with National Anti-Corruption Center, and I can also continue. It happened that a small party, which got only 19 seats in the parliament, now has its all. In these 4 years, last year, they changed electoral system from proportional system to mixed one, and they cut the rights of diaspora, first of all, because 2 years ago, diaspora showed its protest vote at presidential elections when they massively voted for oppositional candidate. Now, opposition will have all the opposition. Almost 1,200,000 Moldovans who are living abroad will have only 3 seats in the parliament. 1 from Russia region, 1 from Europe, and 1 from Canada and United States. 1,200,000. Transnistria will have 2. So in this case, to which institutions opposition should address to?
Well, I agree with you. If you try to modelize the situation, not
I just described it.
Yes, not only the Moldovan one, but the but others, then we can see that there are different roads leading to a mafia state. There is not one royal road on which you can build such a mafia state. In Russia, for example, it was built around the position of the president and the secret service, and they built out. They changed, abandoned the Communist Party earlier already, and they had a new party for themselves, a transmission belt party, the United Russia. In Hungary, it came from a liberal democracy where Viktor Orban, contrary to Putin, built out from the Fidesz, from his own party, a Vezel party, and through the Vezel party, having 2/3 of the seats in the parliament, get the monopoly of political power. And it's a third model to reaching this, what we are speaking here in Moldova, Republic of Moldova, when an oligarch itself buys some political parties for himself, buys the media. In the case of Putin, in the case of Orban, they went into the media from the power. In the case of Plahotniuk, he goes from the media and from the economic power to the political power.
That's true.
And of course, with the help of the political power, he enforces his power as well. And with the help of political power, he can practically destroy the rival patron-client networks, put in jail some representatives or forcing out of the country. This is the same what happened in Russia with the case of Khodorkovsky or Berezovsky or
Or Navalny. Same here in Moldova. For example, now we have a case which is, we don't know how it will finish, but we have strong concerns about the results of parliamentary investigatory commission, which accuses two oppositional parties, PAS of Maya Sandu and Platforma DA of Andrei Nastase, of being financed by Russian special services through a foundation. So, and they addressed to Central Prosecution, asking them to start a criminal case for state treason, what could mean not letting them participate in the elections.
Yes, this is the next result. That what happens with the opposition party structure. Normally in a post-communist mafia state, you have four different types of opposition parties. One is a marginalized party, which is autonomous, independent, but insignificant. The biggest part are the so-called domesticated parties, which are blackmailed, bought up by the chief patron. The third category is the liquidated parties, which can be even physically or administratively prohibited or just blackmailed financially. And the fourth one is the fake parties, which are founded by the ruling party and the ruling elite,
like independent parties.
Just showing that there are opposition parties. Now it has a dynamic, of course, in these regimes, and it means that normally with peaceful methods, practically impossible to win, because in these systems these are not totalitarian dictatorships, where in that dictatorship, in a totalitarian dictatorship, everybody is mobilized. No, it's a combination of mobilization and demobilization. They mobilize their own fans on one hand. They feed them, they money laundering, brainwashing, etc., populist ideology, and so on. On the other hand, they try to demobilize their rivals. Demobilization means, of course, such methods what you mentioned. That
you won't succeed no matter what. You won't succeed because you won't have access to media, anything. So
you don't have access to money for campaign costs. You do not have access to media. It's demobilization. Demobilization if you are persecuted by the chief attorney's office, put in jail or anything like that. And all these regimes, you see all these attempts. Sometimes when a mafia state is established and well developed, it's very difficult to get rid of it without so-called revolutions. What happened, for example, in Ukraine several times, but it somehow grows again back the old machinery.
So for all these regimes, what a critical thinking citizen could do and should do, which tools does he have, he or she?
Citizens.
Or maybe if it's not about citizens, let's speak about the other tools, if you know other tools.
It's a good question. I just want to add that on mafia state, a key component is money, and I think with all this condition in place, Moldova is well placed to attract money, and in particular dirty money. And as we said, it's become this regional money laundering hub and the access door to the EU financial system. And what needs to be done is really a strengthening, and this has to come from the international community, from the EU, strengthening of AML rules, checking the implementation. I've seen that Monival, which is an international body in charge of assessing, reviewing how countries are performing on their anti-money laundering system, is supposed to do a review in 2019. So that's going to be an update of 2012 review, and it will be interesting to see whether they assess that the situation has deteriorated, because it has deteriorated. But if the international community will,
if we continue this topic of money laundering and dirty money, we should realize that Republic of Moldova is a state which signed 4 years ago an association agreement with the European Union. But after 4 years after signing this agreement, in summer 2018, Moldovan Parliament, with the majority of the Democratic Party, adopts on the same day 2 laws. First law is called Citizenship for investments. You just invest 250,000 euro in Moldova. You don't invest it, just give to Moldovan state. You put it on an account of our Minister of Finance for 5 years. You get 5% annually, and after 5 years you get your money back. So I would say it's a great business, and you get Moldovan citizenship immediately. In parallel, they adopted a capital amnesty law, which allows you until 1st February 2019, before elections, to sign a declaration, proper declaration, when you swear to God that the money which you declare from an offshore somewhere in Cyprus or somewhere else are clean money from my grandmother, grandfather, or I don't know from whom. You just sign it, a declaration. You pay 6% from the money you declare, money, assets, anything, any kind of capital. You declare it, and you are free of any criminal case. So how can it be looked? How is it looked like and watched like from Brussels? This kind of structure.
It's really a way to legalize the illegal. Both laws. One is to legalize like dirty money that come in. The other one is to clean the profile of people that try to actually, because what they are offering in reality is because Moldova has like a visa-free regime with the EU. When you buy a passport, a Moldovan passport, you actually buy access to the EU. So it's just a way to clean yourself, your money and your profile before entering the EU, because they probably know that it will be much harder to just knock directly at the EU door. But I'm saying that, and at the same time we've got like similar problems inside the EU. We've got 13 countries that have put in place these so-called golden visa programs. So this selling of citizenship or residence in exchange for substantial investment in the country, and they have quite like competitive and aggressive programs in place, which have generated like 25 billion euros since over the past decade. I've granted like more than 6,000 passports and 100,000 residence permits.
So do you have any evidence that part of this money go for political corruption?
And what we showed in a recent report we released is that it's fair enough if it's a quick way for them to recover from the crisis, but the problem is that it's associated with risk. Little checks are made on the applicants, and we got like the media released a number of scandals where oligarchs, Russian oligarchs, allegedly suspected of money laundering, or Brazilians, tycoons involved in the Lava Jato case were awarded some visas. But you also have problems of governance where this tends to corrupt it's like such big amounts of money that it tends to corrupt the state itself. And so we had a scandal in Portugal, for example, where 11 officials were arrested on grounds of corruption and money laundering and bribery, and same in Hungary.
But because they still have an independent central prosecution or a part of independent justice, this is really important.
Yeah, that's
so a part of institutions are still alive and are still independent.
Yeah.
So.
Well, in a mafia state, it means that the chief attorney is a part of the criminal organization. And like in a mafia, when the governance operated as a criminal organization, then it abolishes the competition. So there are no competitors. In a normal mafia also, there are no competitors within its territory. But now its territory, it's a country itself.
Mr. Babinski, I just wanted to come to civil society, and advertising post came. It's always like that. Civil society is always a bit discriminated, but we will come back with you after. We will come back with you after a short pause. Românesc noi revenim în câteva clipe. Noi continuăm discuția noastră despre state capturate și state mafiote. Mr. Babinski, I wanted to ask you, it seems like there is a lot of work for civil society, and it feels like there is no way out from all of this we are discussing in the first two parts of the show. What can we do as civil society, as media, as opposition?
Okay, can we just go back for a minute to the European Union?
Yeah, sure.
The European Union is, for whatever we say, is a serious institution, and it has to take itself seriously. The association agreements which the European Union signed with Moldova and with Ukraine and with Georgia have to be a success. The European Union can't allow for these agreements to sort of be frittered away, especially the one with Moldova. The European Union does feel very frustrated. It's very angry about what is happening with Moldova. It's cutting off funds, etc., etc. But sooner or later, the European Union, it moves slowly, but it actually does come to conclusions. It does take action. And the action that it will have to take also is on money laundering. The possibilities of money laundering inside the European Union and European member states are large. And this will come under control sooner or later. I suspect sooner than later. This will mean that the arrangement which the oligarch in Moldova is trying to establish, which is a kind of black hole where there are no rules, no regulations, just money laundering, and this will become a place where money can be cleaned and sent on its way. The European Union will not tolerate this. Also, the Americans will not tolerate this. And actually, at the moment, the Americans are much better at fighting money laundering than the European Union, although the European Union will take steps. So this situation, even though we're talking about we are powerless, we can't do anything, they have the money, they win the elections, etc., this can't go on forever. You know, this will change. Also, we mentioned revolution. Remember,
we mentioned the revolution in pause. So you made our secret public, Mr. Babinski.
Yes.
We just discussed. Let's explain. We discussed that in states like ours, it seems like even elections are not an institution, a democratic institution anymore, because oligarchs or all these mafia groups, they try to use elections in order to keep them in power. Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that the association agreement which Moldova has with the European Union is a very long and detailed document, and there are things there which have to be done. If they're not done, then there will be trouble. And another thing that came to my mind is that this arrangement, which is being established in Moldova, is not a very safe arrangement. I mean, you say that you sign a piece of paper, you hand in your 100,000 or 100 million euro, etc. But you can't trust these people, because these are people who are running, who will be running or are running the country, who are cheating their own population. Why shouldn't they cheat you, who brings in the money and gives it to them? This is a mafia state. Mafia people are not known for their probity.
But actually, nobody believes them. The problem is that if Europeans will believe them, when they will take this money out of Moldova, legalized here, and go to European Union or to other states with them. Yeah. Let's discuss the last example of this Azerbaijani wife of a jailed banker with 16 million bill in Harrods. She made shopping for 16 million pounds. And now it's a case of a criminal case. She needs to explain where she did get money from. Are this money legal or not? And I'm asking you, should European Union, as the strongest institution in the region, start asking people from all these mafia states, oligarchic structures, where did you get your money for your villas in Switzerland? For example, our oligarch Mr. Plakhatnyuk has 3 undeclared villas in Switzerland and France. Where did you get your money for all your vacations, like another oligarch Ilan Shor last year or 2 years ago spent almost 500,000 euro for renting a villa in summer in Côte d'Azur, just villa, renting a villa, $500,000. So should European structures ask, where did you get your money from?
Of course.
Yeah, you raise a very valid question. I think the EU is part of the problem because their borders are so porous to money laundering. And that's why the money transit through, as long as this will be the case, the money will transit from Moldova. Also, the money stolen from Moldova, the EU offers a safe haven for criminals that want to hide their money. So the part of the problem is the EU, and part of the solution should be the EU. And the EU needs to clean its own backyard, stop opacity over the identity of beneficial owners of share companies. That is like a very popular instruments used by criminals. It should implement better AML rules, in particular in the banking sector, where you've got a problem of coordination and integration of the AML supervision at EU level. Every member state is doing whatever they want. And you need to also solve this issue of golden visa that's plaguing the system.
But how will you convince political elites? I don't speak about political elites in mafia states, but in normal states.
You were asking about...
just let me put the question by the end. All this money which are coming, shopping, investments, villas, buyings, these are investments in European economies. Each European country wants to have investments. It's a normal thing. You want to be developed. And here, how do you convince them that they should refuse to accept this money which will be invested in properties in their country, that they should not afford them?
Because this money is destroying European institutions. The bribery and the corruption which goes with this flow of money into Europe is destroying European institutions. It is also, this is the role for the civil society forum inside countries like Moldova to keep on talking about this and to keep on telling the European Union that they should do something about it. And the European Union knows it has to do something about it. They know exactly what's going on. They just don't know what to do.
Does it want to do something?
It does, because the money that it gets from these transactions is not as big as you think. It sounds a lot of money, but actually for the whole European economy, it's not. The problem isn't the money that Europe is getting. The problem is banking. I mean, gets quite complicated. The problem is banking is a power for the country, for the member states. To get this right, it has to be a union-wide power, and that means more power for Brussels, and the countries aren't willing to do that. That's one of the bigger problems.
I do not agree with this because I think there is another type of problem in this respect. That on one hand, the EU is a community of countries which share common values. On the other hand, the EU has geopolitical interests, and they are contradicting to each other. So when it is asked that why Hungary is not pushed out from the EU when he does not accept, does not honor the rules of the EU, and they say that because technically it's difficult, no, this is the question. If it would be very easy to push Hungary out of the EU, they would not do also, because immediately the Russians would come in, you know,
and make a proposal.
So the vacuum would be used by the Russians. So a geopolitical interest is in conflict with the shared values of the officially shared values of the EU. And this is why, even a few years ago, with a friend of mine, we wrote an article in which we argued that the multi-level or multi-speed Europe is unavoidable because of this contradiction. And we say that with this enlargement, they bought a lot of countries where the reversion of the democratic processes is going on one hand, and they will to some extent tolerate these half autocratic regimes in the buffer zone, East European buffer zone, just to keep up the Russian influence.
Yeah, but
somehow.
These regimes can be used from inside of European Union to make European Union weaker.
Undermine.
And if we look at some of Russian money who were invested in electoral campaign in France, for example, or in Brexit campaign, you start thinking about much more complicated things.
This is why when you look at that on the base of the Eurozone, it's not a clear idea yet on the Eurozone to have a more strict, more closer cooperation of the countries within the EU, and then to have another relation with these countries. Viktor Orban in Hungary wants to build out a coalition of the Visegrad 4 countries and other East European countries, just as a blackmailing coalition within the EU when he fights for the national sovereignty of the country. He's nothing else, just fighting for the impunity of a criminal organization. His ideology and his politics is very clear. We are the members of the EU, you should pay us, but you should not ask how we steal your money. And of course, in Moldova also, a mafia state steals not only money and fortunes, but steals elections.
Yes.
Steals elections, the national elections, what you mentioned, but the local elections also in Chisinau, it was practically stolen.
Some experts think that elections which will be held on 24th of February are already practically stolen, because the way the circumstances were divided makes opposition. It's not the point of view of some experts here. It's the point of view of Venice Commission, which told that the way the system was designed creates better conditions for people with dirty money, with big money, who will invest money on local level. Because on local level it would be much more easier to...
In Hungary, last national elections, if you count all the money what the government spent and the Fidesz as a governing party for the campaign, it was 50 times more, 50 times more than the money what the opposition parties together spent. For example, all pensioners, just a week before the elections, got a 30 euros worth voucher from the government as a present.
Same here already. Yes. 600 leis for each pensioner before winter holidays. Well, it's 30 euros.
The autocrats can learn from each other.
On a weekly basis, Democratic Party is coming with projects like good roads, good pensions, good salaries, but look what they do. Good roads project, which means the construction of lots of roads in the country. These roads are made from the money from budget. Yes. Which was adopted long before, but now they present it like something made only by Democrats. It's not about budget and Moldovan citizens who pay taxes. It's about Democrats who made it. Democrats, I mean, the members of this party.
Can I just add about this the destruction that this whole system is wreaking in Western countries? I think of Interpol, which is a very old and useful institution for fighting crime. Interpol is being infiltrated also by people from Moldova, and in significant
known like people of Mr. Plahotniuk, 2 people.
In significant positions, and they have been issuing
Red Notice Commission,
extradition orders. So this cancer is going deeper into our institutions. So, and I know that the European Union does sort of go backwards and forwards, and it has its geopolitical interests. But this corruption in a country like Moldova is a serious threat to the future of Western institutions as well.
So, because you told that some tools could come from outside, I'm asking you, like people who are coming outside, who visited Moldova not just not for first time, you know a lot Moldovan profile. What would you do if you would be today a Moldovan civil society activist, a Moldovan oppositioner, or a Moldovan independent journalist? What would you start with or continue with, Mr. Bobinski?
Monitoring the situation, trying to find out as much of what is going on, being active politically, taking part in elections, voting for the right people, doing everything in my power to try and get rid of the government, which is actually what we're doing in Poland at the moment.
Please.
Well, raising awareness of citizens, making sure that they know what's happening really in the reality of like the government, what they are doing, trying also to reach out to the outside and make sure people hear about the situation in Moldova, because sometimes that's a bit far away from Brussels, for example, and it's important that we really understand the political situation there to be able to help in the best capacity. But yeah, citizens awareness raising, I think it's key.
Mr. Magyar.
Yes, I would not give advices, but I highly appreciate them that they take this huge risk in such countries and such regimes that they resist. You know, because it's really a risk. They can be distorted morally, existentially, even sometimes physically, and if they take this risk, I just can appreciate them and be very proud of them.
It's just an example of our channel, for example, which is supported by almost all embassies or international donors based here in Moldova, but we are on a very systemical level attacked by representatives of government or governmental authorities, by Prime Minister, by Speaker of Parliament, by Vice President of Democratic Party, by President of Democratic Party, by state institutions, and it happens on a weekly basis. But we continue to do our job.
Well, congratulations.
Long may you do so.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this discussion. I really hope it will be heard, not only listened, but heard by all Moldovan civil society activists, oppositioners, and media activists. I thank you very much, and for me personally, it was a very interesting discussion. Sper că lecțiile date nouă astăzi vor fi învățate de cei care trebuie să le învețe cât posibil mai repede. Vă doresc o noapte bună. Urmează știrile cu colega mea, Angela Gonța.